Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we take a stack of sources, articles, research, and our own notes, and really try to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight, all custom-tailored for you, our curious listener. Today, we're plunging into a truly provocative concept. I mean, it really challenges everything we think we know about money, time, and, well, living a fulfilling life.
Indeed. We're talking about a framework that, at first glance, might seem radical, maybe even a little bit scary.
Right.
The very title of the book we're exploring, written by Bill Perkins, is Die with Zero.
Yeah, that title.
Now, I can already hear the collective gasp from many of our listeners. Die with zero. It sounds almost irresponsible, doesn't it? Maybe even reckless.
Totally. My first thought, too.
But that's really not what Perkins advocates at all. It's actually about optimizing your entire life's journey, maximizing your fulfillment, and consciously choosing how to allocate your most precious resources.
Okay, optimizing. That sounds less scary than just spending everything.
Exactly. It immediately challenges a core belief many of us hold, that saving as much as possible for as long as possible is always the wisest path.
It really does. So our mission in this deep dive is to dissect Perkins' framework, drawing insights directly from his book to help maybe rethink those deeply ingrained assumptions you might have about saving, spending, and, I guess, the very purpose of wealth. It's natural to feel a bit of discomfort with a title like Die with Zero. I mean, I certainly did.
Yeah.
But we promise to confront those fears head on.
We will. And this isn't just abstract theory. It's really about making deliberate, conscious choices to truly live your best life, both right now and, in the future.
Right. And you mentioned optimization. Perkins has a background that makes this approach kind of logical, right?
Absolutely. This idea truly is an optimization problem, which makes perfect sense coming from Bill Perkins. He's trained as an engineer and made his fortune using those analytical skills as a hedge fund manager. So he views life not as some lofty, abstract, philosophical question, but as a practical challenge. How do you maximize fulfillment while minimizing waste?
Maximize fulfillment, minimize waste. Got it. It's about getting the most out of every single moment you have.
Precisely.
That's a powerful reframing. And to really drive home the finite nature of our health and time, but the very resources we're trying to optimize, Perkins opens his book with a truly poignant story.
He does. It's quite impactful. He introduces us to Erin and her husband, John. Both successful 35-year-old lawyers, 3 young kids, seem like they were really on top of the world.
Yeah, living the dream, as they say.
Right. Then, in October 2008, their lives were just irrevocably altered. John received a grim diagnosis. Clear cell sarcoma. It's a rare and rapidly growing cancer.
Oh, wow. Just devastating news. Shattering their carefully constructed future in an instant.
Completely. The tumor had already spread, and suddenly, John was too sick to work. This left Erin with this immense burden of caring for their family, both emotionally and financially.
That's unimaginable.
It's an extreme case, of course, but what happened next really highlights a universal truth that Perkins wanted to underscore. Perkins, who was a friend of Erin's, told her, with a real sense of urgency, stop what you're doing and spend time as a family while John still can.
And he even offered financial help.
He did. He offered to help cover their expenses. And Erin, who was already intuitively thinking along those lines, made the incredibly difficult decision to quit her demanding job.
What a critical decision that turned out to be.
Absolutely. In the precious months that followed, between John's exhausting treatments, they savored simple pleasures at home, going to the park, watching movies together, playing games, picking up their kids from school. Just being together.
Making memories.
Exactly. And when they had to travel to Boston for a clinical trial, they made sure to use their free time to explore historic sites as a family, making those memories while John was still physically able.
That time must have been priceless.
John died just 3 months after his diagnosis in January 2009. And Erin, despite the immense trauma and grief, is profoundly, deeply glad she quit her job to be with him.
I can only imagine.
She realized that the money she could have earned meant absolutely nothing compared to the time she gained with her husband and children during his final months.
Wow.
So this story really illustrates that everyone's health eventually declines, and we all die. The core question then, regardless of our income level or financial status, is universally applicable. What's the best way to allocate our life energy, our time, our health, our money before we die?
That's a profound question. It really shifts the perspective from just accumulating wealth to maximizing life itself. And it's not just about money, is it? It's about understanding that some experiences are only possible at certain times.
Exactly. You won't be water skiing in your 90s, probably, or climbing Rome's Spanish steps with the same, vigor you might have in your younger years.
Right. Time lost, unlike money, can never be recaptured. Perkins argues that squandering our lives should be a far greater worry than squandering our money. That idea fundamentally reshapes how we think about investing.
It really does. We usually think of investing in terms of financial assets, right? Stocks, real estate, things that grow money. But Perkins is arguing for an entirely different kind of portfolio.
Investing in experiences. That's rule number one, isn't it? Can you elaborate on that and maybe a second rule too?
He absolutely emphasizes that. Rule number one, he says, is to maximize your positive life experiences. It sounds simple, but it's about being deliberate.
Okay.
And rule number two, start investing in those experiences early. Now, the definition of living life fully is going to be incredibly personal, of course.
So different for everyone.
Right. For Perkins, given his background, it includes travel, high-stakes poker, philanthropy. For others, it might be active adventures in nature, pursuing a creative passion, or quiet, home-based pursuits with family. The key, he stresses, isn't what you choose, but that you choose deliberately.
Don't just live on autopilot.
Exactly. Don't just let life happen to you. Actively sculpt it.
That makes so much sense. It's about being intentional with your time and resources. And this is where it gets really interesting, the contrast between spending money on experiences versus material possessions. Psychologically, what's the big difference there?
Well, Perkins points to a wealth of psychological studies that consistently show experiences lead to greater happiness than buying things.
Right, the hedonic treadmill.
Precisely. Think about it. That new gadget, that shiny car, that trendy outfit, they're exciting for a bit, then they depreciate, they break, they go out of style. The initial thrill just fades.
But an experience, those, as Perkins puts it, gain in value over time. He calls this the memory dividend. That's such a powerful concept. Can you break down what he means by that?
Yeah, the memory dividend. It's precisely what it sounds like. Because we humans are blessed with memory, experiences yield ongoing, compounding dividends. We don't wake up with a blank slate, right? Our brains are preloaded with memories we can access, relive, and draw joy from at any time.
Like a mental bank account of good times.
Sort of. Every positive experience you have creates a permanent neural pathway, a memory. And that memory can be re-experienced over and over again.
He uses a simple but powerful door example, right? Knowing what a door is and how to open it is a lifelong dividend from a past learning experience. It's a fundamental memory dividend that helps us navigate the world every single day.
It's a great basic example, and it extends to relationships, too. All the history, conversations, shared experiences, they build the current feelings you have for someone. Without those shared memories, those relationships simply wouldn't exist in the same way.
They're built on memory dividends.
Exactly. It's beautifully illustrated with the story of Jason Rufo, Perkins's friend and former roommate. Back in their early 20s, both were working as screen clerks in Manhattan, barely making ends meet at about $18,000 a year.
Wow, tough start.
Yeah. Suddenly, Jason decided to take 3 months off to backpack through Europe.
On $18K a year, how?
Well, this is the crazy part. To make it happen, he had to borrow about $10,000 from a loan shark.
No way. Perkins must have thought he was nuts.
He absolutely did. Perkins thought he was completely insane. He worried about Jason's safety, his career prospects, everything. It seemed like such a reckless decision for someone with so little.
I can see why. But Jason went anyway.
He was determined. He flew to London with a Eurail pass and no set schedule, truly embarking on an adventure. When he returned, his income was exactly the same as Bill's, but as Perkins vividly describes it, Jason was infinitely richer.
Infinitely richer.
What? And remember, this was the early 90s. Pre-high-speed internet, pre-social media. Jason's stories and photos of Dachau, the then communist Czech Republic, enjoying baguettes in a Paris park, falling in love on a Greek island beach. They weren't just stories, they were like dispatches from an exotic explorer. He had lived something extraordinary.
Perkins must have been so envious.
Deeply envious, he admits. He regretted not going with Jason, and he reflected on why that was such a specific window of opportunity. When he finally went to Europe at 30, it was too late to replicate that youthful, raw experience.
Why too late?
He felt he was too bougie for youth hostels by then, too burdened by responsibilities to take months off work. Jason, on the other hand, timed it perfectly.
He wouldn't enjoy the hostels now, probably.
Exactly what Jason says. He freely admits he wouldn't enjoy sleeping in a crowded hostel now at his current age. He has absolutely no regrets about the expense despite the high-interest loan. Jason told Perkins, Whatever I paid, I feel it was a bargain because of the life experiences I gained. You can't take those away, and I would never have them erased for any amount of money.
That's truly priceless. The memory dividend in action.
Absolutely.
It's powerful, isn't it? The memory dividend comes from reliving those experiences, not just the initial event. A favorite song on the radio, a familiar scent, stumbling upon an old photo. They can trigger vivid recollections that bring joy, nostalgia, even a chuckle.
Right. Every time you remember, you get an additional little hit of enjoyment from reliving it. It might be a tiny fraction of the original, but those memories accumulate and profoundly shape who you are. That's why people instinctively grab photo albums in a house fire, right? Those memories are literally irreplaceable.
It makes sense. And tech companies know this, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Tech companies like Facebook and Google Photos have monetized this very human desire with their On This Day features. They spark good feelings and loyalty by tapping into your memory dividend. They know that reliving positive memories is inherently valuable.
You can cash in non-financially by deliberately creating these memories.
Far more profoundly, yes. By deliberately creating valuable memories yourself throughout your life.
And the compounding effect is particularly strong when you share memories, right? That amplifies their value, creating new experiences in the process. Communication, laughter, bonding, giving advice, just reminiscing together.
Exactly. Perkins says positive experiences are radioactive and contagious in a good way. They start a chain reaction that releases more energy, joy, and connection than you might have thought possible.
That's a great image.
He demonstrates this beautifully with how he gave his frail father an iPad. He filled it with digitized football highlight reels from his dad's college days.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. His dad, too old for new vacations or physical activities, still found immense enjoyment and pride reliving those moments from his youth, even though they were decades old. Perkins concluded from this that you retire on your memories. It's your personal bank of unforgettable moments that continues to pay out.
You retire on your memories.
Oh,
That's
okay.
that. So if we're trying to optimize this, Perkins introduces a way to quantify it. He talks about experience points and a fulfillment curve. How do those work?
Right. To help us think about this more quantitatively, Perkins introduces experience points. It's really a mental exercise where you assign a numerical value to each experience based on your personal enjoyment.
Okay.
Peak experiences, like Jason's European adventure, get many points. Small pleasures, like a perfect cup of coffee or a quiet evening with a loved one, get a few. Importantly, there are no negative points. Even bad experiences can yield positive memory dividends later from the lessons learned or just the stories they generate.
Interesting. So you sum these up.
Yeah. You can then sum these annual experience points and represent them as a bar on a fulfillment curve. Higher bars mean more fulfillment in that particular year. The goal is to shape this curve, to consciously design a life rich in experiences distributed over time.
It's like traditional investment advice, but for life.
Pretty much. Invest early, and by the time you get to a certain age, look at how much you've accumulated. Perkins's version is, invest in your life's experiences, and start early, start early, start early.
Now, a common reaction here might be, okay, but how can I invest in experiences early when I'm broke or just starting out? How does Perkins address that?
That's a key point, and he's quick to address it. He emphasizes that experiences don't have to be costly. Remember Jason's cheap hostel trip?
Right.
Think about free outdoor concerts in the park, board games with friends, exploring your own town on foot or by public transport, learning a new skill from YouTube. When you're young, healthy, and maybe less jaded, you can derive a huge amount of enjoyment, even from experiences that don't cost a lot.
Your enthusiasm counts for a lot.
Exactly. Your raw enthusiasm and openness to novelty act as powerful multipliers.
It really boils down to making deliberate choices, not living on autopilot. He contrasts forced experiences like dissecting a frog in school
Yeah, I remember that.
with the incredible freedom of adult choices. And he directly challenges what many financial advisors call the latte factor, your daily Starbucks habit. What's his take on that?
He's not saying you should stop enjoying your coffee necessarily, but he asks you to be completely aware of what your Starbucks habit is costing you.
The opportunity cost.
Right. He wants you to consider the direct trade-off. Is your daily latte or any other small habitual expense truly worth, say, a round-trip ticket to anywhere in the U.S. every few months, or a weekend getaway?
It's about making the choice consciously.
Exactly. The answer is yours, and it might be yes, that latte brings you immense daily joy, but the point is to make that decision consciously. That deliberate choice in how you spend your money, and crucially your time, is the essence of maximizing your life energy. It's about aligning your spending with your values, not just letting it happen.
That's a great practical application. Now let's pivot to what many people struggle with. The pervasive problem of oversaving, which Perkins identifies as a significant waste of life energy. His rule number 3 is simple, and it's the title of his book, Die with Zero.
Yes, die with zero means precisely that. Genuinely examining all the hours of your life you spend earning money you never actually spend.
Working for nothing, essentially.
Pretty much. Perkins illustrates this with a detailed, eye-opening example of a fictitious woman named Elizabeth. She's a 45-year-old single lawyer in Austin, earning $60,000 a year. After taxes and deductions, her net income is about $48,911.
Okay.
She works 50 hours a week, so her take-home pay is approximately $19.56 per hour. She's been diligent, paid off her student loans, and her house is now worth $450,000.
It sounds like she's doing well.
On paper, yes. Elizabeth is quite frugal, spending only $32,911 a year and saving a substantial $16,000. Her plan is to retire at 65. By then, she'll have saved $320,000 in her retirement accounts. At her house, and her net worth at 65 will be $770,000.
A decent nest egg.
Seems like it. Perkins then makes some reasonable assumptions. She spends $32,000 annually in retirement, and her investments keep pace with inflation.
Okay, so what happens?
So here's the kicker. She dies at 85, 20 years into retirement, leaving behind a whopping $130,000.
$130,000 unspent.
Right. Now, let's calculate the true cost of that $130,000. Perkins calculates it using her hourly rate. $130,000 divided by $19.56 an hour equals 6,646 hours.
Wow. 6,646 hours.
That's more than 2.5 years of 50-hour work weeks.
2.5 years of working for free. What a waste of life energy. That's quite a visceral way to put it, making those unspent dollars feel like lost years.
It really hits home. And this concept actually dates back to Franco Modigliani, a Nobel Prize-winning economist from the 1950s, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. His life cycle hypothesis.
Right. Modigliani's hypothesis suggests it's economically rational for an individual's wealth to decline to zero by their date of death, assuming they knew that date.
Which we don't, obviously.
Right. So since we don't, the rational approach is to plan for the maximum age anyone can live, basically. The core idea is to spread your wealth across all those potential years to maximize enjoyment throughout your entire lifespan, rather than hoarding it unnecessarily at the end.
It's about optimizing for fulfillment, not just accumulation.
Yeah.
But what about those who genuinely say, but I love my job, my work is my passion, it's play, not work? Perkins acknowledges that, right?
Yes, he acknowledges that some people truly love their work, like the professional dancer he dated. But his counterargument is this. Even if work feels like play, you're still missing out on other experiences.
You can't do everything at once.
Precisely. Even if dance is your life, you probably wouldn't enjoy doing it 24/7. And your preferences might even change as you get older. Maybe you want to dance less in your 50s than in your 20s.
That makes sense.
The insidious part, Perkins argues, is that the habit of working for money is incredibly powerful and often outlives the initial joy or purpose.
It becomes automatic.
Yeah. He illustrates this with the story of John Arnold, a brilliant energy trader and friend. John started a hedge fund, Centaurus, with the explicit goal of getting rich quickly so he could enjoy life. He even told Perkins, once I make $15 million, if I'm still trading, punch me in the face.
That's a pretty clear goal.
Yeah.
So did he stop at $15 million?
Nope. John kept shifting his goalposts. $15 million became $25 million, then $100 million. By 2010, his charitable foundation had $711 million.
Oh.
Yet he kept working, despite not loving the job anymore and having achieved financial independence many, many times over.
So when did he finally retire?
He finally retired at age 38 in 2012, having amassed over $4 billion.
$4 billion at 38.
Right. And Perkins argues that for John, retirement at 38 was actually a few years too late.
Too late, with $4 billion.
Yeah. First, he'll never get those years back he spent just making money when he didn't need to. He'll never be 30 again, and his children will never again be babies. Second, he now faces what Perkins calls the Brewster's Millions problem for the ultra-rich.
From the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's actually incredibly hard to spend his fortune fast enough without, spoiling his children or just wasting it inefficiently.
So it's not a calculated choice anymore, but just A habit, like the thrill of making money overtakes the thrill of actually living.
That's the argument. Like a smoker who started for coolness but now can't quit because of addiction. And you're saying this isn't unique to the ultra-rich.
No, Perkins believes this applies universally. If you spend hours earning money and die without spending it, you've needlessly wasted precious hours of your life.
Whether it's $1 million or $50,000 unspent.
It's a waste of potential experiences that could have made your life richer and more fulfilling. It's the missed opportunities, the unlived moments.
Okay, now let's address the elephant in the room. The most common, often visceral objection people have to die with zero. The fear of running out of money before death.
Yeah, I get it. Nobody wants to spend their last years in poverty. That's terrifying. How does Perkins tackle this very real, very human fear?
Perkins' stance is that people generally save too much for too late in their lives. They deprive themselves of valuable experiences now for a much older future self who may never even live long enough or be healthy enough to enjoy that money.
So the fear is often overblown.
He argues that this fear, while understandable, is often based on an inaccurate perception of how people actually spend their money in retirement and, frankly, how long they truly live.
And the statistics seem to bear this out. The Federal Reserve Board's survey of consumer finances shows a clear, surprising trend, doesn't it?
It really does. The median net worth for U.S. households continues to rise as people get older.
It doesn't go down.
Nope. For 45, 54-year-olds, the median is $124,200. For 65, 74-year-olds, it's $224,100. And for those 75 or older, it's the highest of all age groups at $264,800.
That's incredible. People are still accumulating wealth in their late 70s and beyond.
Yeah. Perkins says, and this is quite striking, people in their 70s are still saving for the future. This means millions of Americans are on track for their hard-earned money to outlive them, completely missing out on potential experiences in their healthier, more active years.
That's astonishing. You'd expect people to be drawing down their savings, not growing them in retirement?
You would think. And a 2018 study from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, or EBRI, reinforces this even further. They looked at how much older Americans' assets changed during their first 20 years of retirement. What they found was that people are very slow to spend down their assets.
How slow?
Well, the median ratio of household spending to income hovers around 1.1, meaning spending often just declines along with income. Retirees with $500,000 or more before retirement had spent down a median of only 11.8% of that money 20 years later or by the time they died.
So they left behind almost 90%.
Over 88% of their nest egg, yeah, untouched.
Wow. Even for lower wealth groups.
Even low-wealth retirees spent only about 25% of their assets after 18 years. And here's the truly counterintuitive part. 1/3 of all retirees actually increase their assets after retirement.
Increase them.
How? Maybe through continued saving, inheritances, or investment growth outpacing spending. And pensioners who have guaranteed income and theoretically need to save less spent down the lowest percentage, only 4%.
Okay, this clearly shows that people are not spending their retirement savings once they reach retirement. They are very much not on track to die with zero.
Not even close, for the most part.
This phenomenon aligns with what financial planners often call the slow-go and no-go years, right?
Yeah.
Spending naturally decreases.
Exactly. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey from 2017 found that average annual spending actually declines significantly with age. It was around $65,000 for 55, 64-year-olds, $55,000 for 65, 74-year-olds, and down to $42,000 for those 75 and older.
And that's even with rising healthcare costs.
Yes, because other expenses like clothing, dining out, entertainment, travel, they drop significantly as mobility and energy decline. The public often isn't aware of this predictable pattern leading to that cycle of oversaving and underspending.
Which brings us to the argument for precautionary saving, specifically for unforeseen medical expenses. This is often the biggest mental hurdle for people. What if I get really sick?
Right. Perkins counters this with what he calls the alien robot invasion insurance analogy.
Okay, I have to ask, what's alien robot invasion insurance?
It's his slightly provocative way of saying that while costly medical care is far more likely than an alien invasion, for most people, no amount of savings will realistically cover the most catastrophic, open-ended care.
Like really extreme costs.
Exactly. For example, cancer treatments can easily run $500,000 a year. Or, as Perkins experienced with his own father, a single hospital stay could cost $50,000 per night.
Astronomical.
So he asks, does it truly matter if you saved an extra $10,000 or even $250,000 for that kind of scenario. That $250,000 saved over years could be wiped out in just 5 days.
So the extra saving doesn't really help in the truly catastrophic cases.
His point isn't to be insensitive to illness, but that for the vast majority of people, the expense is so immense it won't make a real difference. Either government programs, insurance, or charity will cover it, or unfortunately, you will likely die. The extra savings might not change the outcome.
And for the ultra-wealthy, he even argues that saving for a few extra months in the hospital isn't logical.
Precisely. Perkins emphasizes there's a big difference between living a life and just being kept alive. He'd rather die when the time is right, having lived fully, than sacrifice his better, healthier years for a few more days on a ventilator with near zero quality of life.
It's a stark thought, but his catchphrase encapsulates it. See you at the grave.
Yeah, it's memorable.
So what's the practical application here? If the fear of catastrophic medical costs is a real concern, Perkins recommends considering long-term care insurance. How does that fit into the die with zero framework?
It's actually a perfect tool for it. Long-term care insurance, especially if purchased before age 65, is a way to cover potential future care needs, like nursing home care or in-home assistance, without the need for massive, uncertain oversaving in your personal accounts.
You offload the risk.
Exactly. You transfer that specific risk to an insurance company. This leads directly to rule number 4. Use all available tools to help you die with zero.
Okay, so LTC insurance is one tool. What other tools does he suggest?
Well, another simple but powerful tool is a life expectancy calculator. Perkins urges everyone to try them, like the Actuary's Longevity Illustrator or Living to 100.
Why? To find out when you'll die.
Not exactly. It's not about knowing your exact death date, obviously, but getting a realistic picture of your lifespan probabilities. Getting a statistical range helps you make much better, more informed decisions about earning, saving, and spending over your lifetime. It grounds your planning in reality, not just vague fear.
Makes sense. And he also introduces annuities as a tool. Most people are familiar with life insurance, which protects against dying too young. But annuities are essentially the opposite, aren't they?
They are, in a way. Annuities protect against longevity risk. That's the risk of outliving your savings. They do this by providing guaranteed income for life no matter how long you live.
Like a personal pension.
Sort of. Ron Lieber, the New York Times' Your Money columnist, agrees, saying annuities are more like insurance against outliving your money. Perkins warns that you are not a good insurance agent, meaning insurance companies have an edge because they can pool risk across millions of people. As individuals, we can't do that. Without an annuity, you're essentially forced to self-insure against living a very long time.
Which means you have to save way more just in case.
Exactly. You have to leave a large cushion for the worst-case scenario living to 100 or beyond, which inevitably leads to oversaving and dying with considerable money left over. By trying to play insurance agent yourself, you aren't maximizing your life, you're playing it overly safe and likely wasting potential experiences.
This is a truly radical idea for many, but it forms the foundation for how Perkins thinks about leaving money to heirs.
Precisely. It directly challenges the deeply ingrained cultural norm of wanting to leave a substantial inheritance.
Okay, so if we're talking about spending down your money, what about the kids? This is always the first question Perkins gets when he talks about dying with zero. So what's rule number 5?
Rule number 5 is clear. Give money to your children or to charity when it has the most impact. This tackles the selfish bastard accusation directly, which he apparently hears a lot.
I can imagine.
Perkins's firm stance is, the money you're leaving to your kids is not your money. Spend all your money. If it's truly for them, give it to them before you die, when it can actually make a difference in their lives. As he puts it, quite bluntly, dead people can't give money away.
He distinguishes between intentional and unintentional giving. Right.
Yes. Intentional bequests, where you plan to give a certain amount, versus unintentional bequests, which are just a random byproduct of precautionary saving money you didn't get around to spending.
The problem with late inheritances is significant, isn't it? It feels like the money often arrives when it's least needed, or at least less impactful.
That's exactly right. Data shows that the majority of inheritances are received late in life, with the peak probability around age 60.
Age 60. That's often well past peak earning years. Kids might be grown.
Exactly. Perkins gives the poignant example of Virginia Collin. She struggled financially for years, raising 4 children, mostly at the edge of poverty. Her parents, fearing not having enough for themselves, saved rigorously. When her mother died at 76, Virginia, then 49, finally received a $130,000 inheritance.
So while certainly welcome, the money arrived when Virginia was well past her peak need and probably peak ability to enjoy it in certain ways. I can imagine the bittersweet feeling.
Absolutely. She rightly points out, if you get the money when you're 30, you can buy a nice house and raise your kids in the environment you want. You could put it away for their college tuition. But at 49, her kids were older. The house was likely already bought. The immediate life-altering impact had passed.
The timing was off.
Way off. The hypocrisy, Perkins notes, is that people claim to put kids first, but they don't plan when the money will actually have the most impact on their children's lives. They wait until it's often too late for maximum benefit.
So what's the optimal timing for giving to children? If not at death, then when?
Perkins suggests that later is better than never, of course, but 60 is generally worse than 50, and 50 is worse than 40. This is because a person's ability to extract enjoyment from the gift declines with age, just like their ability to enjoy their own money diminishes.
So give it earlier. How early?
He cites an informal Twitter poll where over 3,500 people voted. More than 50% chose 26-35 as the ideal age for an inheritance.
Wow, 26 to 35. That's surprisingly young for such a potentially significant gift. What were the reasons people gave?
They largely cited the time value of money. An earlier gift allows for better compound interest and long-term growth. They also acknowledge the immaturity problem that getting money too young might lead to squandering it.
A balance, then.
Right. And Perkins adds the crucial element of health. You get more value out of money before your health inevitably declines. So the 26 to 35 age range, he concludes, seems to combine being old enough to likely be trusted with money, yet young enough to fully enjoy its benefits, maybe for a down payment on a first home, starting a business, or pursuing a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
That makes a lot of sense. And he even applies this personally, doesn't he? With his own family.
He does. He realized he had money in his will designated for his older mom, sister, and brother. And he thought, what about now? Do I want to give anything now when they can enjoy those gifts more than later?
And the answer was yes.
A resounding yes. He gave them that amount while they could still truly benefit from it. This act, he says, was incredibly liberating. It allowed him to clearly separate their money from his money, freeing him to spend to the hilt on myself without guilt.
Okay, so the real legacy for your children isn't just money, but shared experiences and memories. This sounds a bit like the best things in life are free, cliché, but Perkins pushes back on that, doesn't he?
He does. He argues it's not some schmaltzy best things in life are free statement because, as he points out, everything you do takes away from something else.
Opportunity cost again.
Always. Spending time with family often means not spending that time earning money and vice versa. It's a trade-off, and you need to be conscious of it.
And studies seem to support the immense value of that time spent together.
They absolutely do. Research shows that young adults who received more affection from their parents as children often have better relationships, lower substance abuse and depression rates, and even better health in middle age.
Wow.
The value of time with you, an extra day home from work, attending games or recitals, teaching them a skill may not be fully valued by children in the moment, especially when they're young, but it has immense retrospective value. It yields invaluable memory dividends for them later in life, shaping their well-being and sense of connection.
So the trade-off is clear. Is each additional hour of work you do truly worth it to you and your children? Does it add to or deplete your legacy of shared experiences?
It's a critical question to ask yourself regularly. Perkins points to the terrible inefficiency of someone like Sylvia Bloom. Remember her story?
The legal secretary who secretly saved millions.
That's her. Saved $8.2 million, but lived incredibly frugally, took the subway, lived in a rent-controlled apartment, only to leave her fortune to charity at her death.
So the money wasn't used during her life.
Right. Needy people during her lifetime didn't benefit from her immense wealth when they needed it most. The money just sat unused, inert, while opportunities to do good were missed day after day.
This contrasts sharply with the concept of giving while living, doesn't it? Like Robert F. Smith paying off the student loans for the entire Morehouse College graduating class, or Chuck Feeney.
The co-founder of Duty Free Shoppers? Yeah. He famously gave away his entire multi-billion-dollar fortune during his lifetime.
And Perkins says this principle applies at any scale.
Precisely. He stresses it applies whether you have billions, thousands, or just hundreds to give. For charity, there's truly no such thing as too soon. Money for medical research now can combat disease sooner. Money for education now can transform lives today. Waiting until death to give means losing all the potential impact that money could have had during your lifetime.
That's a powerful argument for proactive generosity, whether to family or charity. Now, let's shift gears and talk about dynamic balance in your life, because Die with Zero isn't about being financially reckless, but about making deliberate, conscious choices throughout your life. Rule number 6, don't live your life on autopilot. Perkins admits he swung between extremes himself.
He certainly did. Early in his career, he was a penny-pinching fire guy. Financial independence, retire early, saving every cent, constantly denying himself small pleasures.
Been there.
Right. Then his boss, Joe Farrell, who he greatly respected, told him he was basically an idiot for saving so much when his earning power was only going to go up.
That must have been a shock.
He said it was a life-changing moment. It cracked open his head to new ideas about balancing earnings with spending, but then he swung too far the other way, becoming what he calls an autopilot spend guy.
An autopilot spend guy? What does that mean? Like just buying stuff without thinking?
Pretty much. He describes just buying expensive stereos he couldn't truly appreciate, or going to restaurants not much better than cheaper ones just because he had the money. He calls this replacing one mistake with another, being too thrifty, then too spendthrift without much thought.
So what's the sweet spot?
The real wisdom he gleaned from Joe, he realized later, is striking the right balance between spending on the present and only on what you genuinely value, and saving smartly for the future. It's about being present and intentional with every dollar and every hour.
He critiques rigid rules like the common 50-30-20 rule, right? The one that suggests budgeting 50% for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings. Why doesn't he believe the universal rule is effective?
Perkins argues there's no way can the same ratio of spending to saving be right for everyone. And more important, no way should your savings percentage be the same when you're 22 as when you're 42 or 52. It just doesn't make sense.
The optimal balance has to shift over time.
It absolutely must dynamically shift throughout your life. When you're young, with a strong expectation of rising income, it might even make sense to borrow modestly, and not credit card debt, obviously, but maybe a reasonable student loan for education that boosts your long-term earning power.
Or maybe even for a big experience, like Jason Rufo.
Maybe, within reason. Rather than rigidly saving 20%. Forgoing those unique, youthful experiences means working for a richer future self who might be too old or too sick to enjoy them, which is a suboptimal use of your precious life energy.
But when you're older, you obviously need to save for retirement. Even then, you're saying there's no magic constant savings rate.
Yeah.
This brings us to the core concept of the declining utility of money with age.
Exactly. This is a fundamental concept for Perkins. It means a person's ability to extract enjoyment from money fundamentally declines as they get older.
Can you give an example?
He uses the deathbed scenario. Imagine a person on their deathbed. They're too weak to move, perhaps need a feeding tube, their cognitive abilities waning. You can offer them a private jet to anywhere in the world, or the finest meal.
But they can't use it.
Exactly. They're not going anywhere, and they can't eat. Whether they've saved $1 million or $1 billion, the money won't make a real difference in their enjoyment of what little life they have left. Perkins puts it bluntly. At this point in life, the only person with less ability to extract enjoyment from money is the one in the morgue or the grave.
Okay, that's pretty stark. So what does this rather grim scenario have to do with you, our listener, who might be a healthy 40-year-old right now?
Everything. Perkins stresses that the undeniable fact that we all will die has profound implications for every single day of our lives.
How so?
Think about it. If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, your behavior would dramatically change, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
If you were 2 days away, it would change differently, but still dramatically. He encourages you to iterate this logic out to your actual probable death date, seeing how the balance between living for today and planning for the future gradually yet inevitably shifts over time.
And failing to consider your death date at all leads to acting as if you'll live forever.
Which means you'll never get the balance right. You'll likely oversalve and underlive. It's a harsh reality, but thinking about death and deterioration gives a much-needed urgency to life, helping you avoid putting off wonderful experiences indefinitely.
This leads beautifully into rule number 7. Think of your life as distinct seasons, or time bucket your life. This is about acknowledging that physical decline isn't sudden.
Right. It's gradual, but absolutely inevitable. Perkins gives examples from his own life. He loved playing football and tennis, but by 50, his knees began to hurt. His friend Greg, an avid skier, can't ski 7 days straight anymore like he used to.
It happens to everyone.
It does. And his girlfriend's 69-year-old granddad, Chris, a former swim coach, struggled to swim just 30 yards to the soggy Dollar Bar, a place he used to swim to easily.
It sounds like a mental disconnect with reality that many people experience. We don't always realize our physical limits are gradually encroaching, perpetuating this myth of endless go-go years in retirement.
That's spot on. And medical research confirms this universally. Different body systems deteriorate at different rates, but they all decline with age. It's an undeniable biological fact. 80-year-olds are a lot less healthy than 25-year-olds.
You can slow it down, but not stop it.
Exactly. While you certainly have a say in the shape of the decline through health maintenance, exercise, diet, not smoking, you will not be healthier at 65 than you were at 25. Accepting this reality allows for smarter life planning.
So what does this mean in terms of practical application for our listeners? How does health factor in?
It means that health is the single biggest factor, or multiplier, for lifetime fulfillment. Small improvements in your health now have a compounding effect on your future enjoyment, your ability to have experiences.
So invest in health.
Absolutely. Perkins encourages spending time and money on health. Joining a good gym, hiring a personal trainer, following fitness videos online, or even entering into prop bets like the one he made with poker-playing brothers Jamie and Matt Staples.
What was that bet?
He bet them a large sum if they reached the same weight in a year. Jamie had to lose over 100 pounds, and Matt had to gain over 50 pounds of muscle. They did it. They won the bet.
Wow.
But even if they hadn't, the profound health benefits far outweighed any money involved. As he says, improved health improves everything in your life, makes every experience more enjoyable at every age. It's an investment in your capacity to experience.
That's a powerful incentive. Another opportunity for balance he mentions is trading money for free time. When is this most impactful?
This strategy is usually most impactful in your middle years when you often have more money than time. The classic example is laundry.
Laundry.
Yeah. If you net, say, $40 an hour after taxes, and doing laundry takes you 2 hours each week, that represents an $80 value of your time, right? Then paying $50 for a laundry service is a complete no-brainer. You're effectively buying back 2 hours of your valuable life energy for less than you earn in that time.
And this applies to any undesirable chore, like house cleaning, right? Mowing the lawn.
Absolutely. Perkins himself started outsourcing chores in his 20s. He opted for rollerblading in Central Park and long brunches over cleaning his apartment. He now has lifelong memories of those pleasant, carefree weekends.
So you reduce negative experiences and increase positive ones.
Precisely. By paying to get out of tasks you don't enjoy, you directly reduce negative experiences and increase positive experiences by freeing up time for enjoyable activities. So, if you regret missing experiences in your 20s due to overworking, this is a way to rebalance your life now and gain back some of that precious time for joy.
This also ties into Perkins's concept of your personal interest rate. This is a fascinating idea. What does he mean by that?
It really is interesting because your ability to extract enjoyment from money declines with age. The older you are, the more someone should theoretically have to pay you to delay an experience. Your personal interest rate, in effect, rises with age.
Can you give an example?
He uses a would I rather question to illustrate. Would I rather have one trip to Mexico now or 2 such trips in, say, 10 years? If you're 20, you might rationally choose to wait. You'll likely still have your health and energy in 10 years, and 2 trips are better than 1.
But if you're older?
But if you're 70, you probably don't want to wait until 80. Declining health, energy, or perhaps the experience might not even be available or enjoyable to you later. This framework helps make very deliberate choices about when to spend and when to save based on your age and health.
And that's where the time bucketing tool comes in. It's rule number 7. Think of your life as distinct seasons. Perkins uses an anecdote about his daughters outgrowing a movie.
Yeah, Pooh's Heffalump movie. He realized they'd outgrown it, and it hit him that everything eventually fades. Realizing this inevitability isn't meant to be depressing, he argues it actually makes you appreciate the present more deeply.
He calls this concept mini-deaths, which sounds bleak but is actually profound.
It does sound bleak, but it's true. We die a multitude of deaths throughout our lives. Think about it. The last time you played hide and seek with childhood friends, the last heartfelt conversation with a beloved professor, the final year your knees allowed you to ski black diamonds.
Those windows of opportunity close.
They close forever, often without fanfare or even our conscious awareness at the time. Perkins uses the analogy of resort swimming pools, the kiddie pool, the teen pool, the adult pool, the senior pool. You cannot transfer physical experiences indefinitely from one pool to another. Once you're too old for the water slide, you're just too old, regardless of how much money or regret you have.
This problem of regret from overly delayed gratification isn't just for the end of life. It happens at every stage, doesn't it?
Absolutely. From the bookworm who missed high school fun to the middle-aged dad who missed irreplaceable moments with his teens chasing promotions, Perkins highlights Bronnie Ware's research on the top 5 regrets of the dying. What were the 2 most relevant for this discussion?
I think they were wishing they'd had the courage to live a life true to themselves, not the life others expected.
Right.
And the classic, I wish I had not worked so hard.
Exactly. And Perkins stresses that thinking about this isn't meant to be depressing. In fact, thinking about impending loss or anticipatory grief can actually make you happier in the present.
How does that work?
A psychological experiment with college freshmen showed that those who imagined moving away in 30 days and were urged to savor their remaining time on campus ended up happier than a control group. Deliberately thinking about limited time helps you prioritize and appreciate what you have now.
So how do you time bucket? How does someone listening actually put this into practice?
It's a very practical exercise he lays out. First, draw a timeline of your life, maybe in 5 or 10-year intervals, from now until your probable death date based on those calculators.
Okay, visualize the time.
Second, list all the key experiences you want to have in your life, both big and small, without worrying about money or feasibility yet. Just dream big.
Get it all down.
And third, drop each pursuit into its ideal time bucket on your timeline. For instance, if you want to ski 50 more times in your life, when will those ski days realistically happen? You might allocate 20 trips for your prime physical years, 15 for middle age, and maybe 15 for your later years, assuming you stay healthy enough.
And I imagine you quickly realize some experiences are much better suited for certain ages.
Absolutely. Mountain climbing and, attending loud music festivals might be better for your younger self. Quiet libraries, movies, maybe gentle cruises might be better suited for your older self.
So this is different from a traditional bucket list.
Very different. A bucket list is just a static list. Time bucketing is about when to have these experiences, distributing them optimally across your lifespan to maximize your overall fulfillment curve.
Where do the experiences usually cluster?
Your initial buckets, without money constraints, will likely skew heavily to your younger years, 20s, 30s, due to peak health and energy. If children are included, there's often another peak in your 30s and 40s as you experience things with them. This deliberate planning is incredibly valuable because it brings a conscious awareness to your finite time and helps you prioritize.
That makes so much sense. It shifts the focus from simply accumulating to actually living. And this leads us to rule number 8. Know when to stop growing your wealth, or what Bill Perkins calls knowing your peak. He vividly illustrates this with his own 45th birthday celebration. Can you tell us about that? It sounds epic.
Oh, it does sound epic. He describes renting out the entirety of the luxurious Hotel Tijuana in St. Bart's.
The whole hotel.
The whole place, flying in dozens of family and friends from every stage of his life, old friends, new friends, family. He booked more rooms next door, arranged elaborate boat trips, picnics, and nightly entertainment, including a private concert by Natalie Merchant.
Natalie Merchant, wow. That must have cost a fortune.
He admits it cost an insane amount of money, a very significant portion of his liquid net worth at the time. But he says he has absolutely no regrets.
No regrets at all. Why was it so special that he felt it was worth it?
He remembers holding his wife, listening to Natalie Merchant, seeing his mom chat with the singer, and looking around at all his loved ones on this beautiful beach. He thought, this might just be what heaven looks like.
Creating a peak memory.
Exactly. People still talk about that week with him years later, and he finds that reliving those days in his mind feels almost as good as being there. He chose age 45 deliberately because his father had already died and his mother's health had declined substantially by the time his 50th birthday rolled around. Some friends couldn't even make it to his 50th.
So waiting would have diminished the experience.
Significantly. Waiting, he realized, would have meant sacrificing the ability to share that extraordinary experience with everyone he loved at a time when they could all fully participate. This highlights a crucial point he makes. Indefinitely delayed gratification means no gratification.
That's a profound thought. So the net worth peak is the point in your life when your net worth is the highest it will ever be. Traditionally, net worth typically rises throughout working life and often continues to climb into retirement. But Perkins' advice diverges sharply from that traditional trajectory, doesn't it?
It fundamentally diverges. If your goal is to maximize lifetime fulfillment, converting life energy into experience points, then your net worth must stop climbing at some point and start declining.
Why must it?
Because if it keeps rising into your 60s, 70s, or even 80s, you won't die with zero. That means you've lost potential experience points, opportunities to live fully that you sacrificed to earn money you never spent. The goal is to deliberately determine the date of your peak. And crucially, he emphasizes it's a date, not a specific dollar number. It's a point in time, not a financial sum you have to hit.
Okay, a date. But surely there's a safety net needed. Before you start spending down, you must ensure you have a survival threshold, the bare minimum to live on. This is a number, isn't it?
Yes, that part is a number, but it's often lower than dutiful savers might think.
How so?
For example, if you're 55 and expect to live to 80, with an annual basic cost of survival of, say, $12,000, you might initially think you need $300,000, $12,000 times 25 years. But the real amount, Perkins explains, is much lower because your money earns interest. If your nest egg earns just 3% above inflation, you only need about $212,000 initially to cover that $12K a year for 25 years.
Because the money grows while you spend it.
Exactly. Your money earns interest, offsetting withdrawals, and potentially even growing if you're only withdrawing a safe amount. Once you calculate and meet this threshold, you have that peace of mind. You don't need to work just for money anymore, and you can start carefully dipping into savings for those vital experiences. That's when the peak truly becomes a date, a conscious decision about when to stop accumulating and start decumulating.
Perkins cautions against universal numerical targets like $1 million or $1.5 million for retirement. Why is he against those specific numbers?
He says they're not right for everyone, and more importantly, they can lead to endless goalpost shifting and just working on autopilot. You hit $1 ever, maybe you feel you need $1.05M and then $2.
Chasing an arbitrary number can make you miss out on life now.
Precisely. More money doesn't equal more experience points. Acquiring extra money takes time, sacrificing your free time and potentially your health, which are the very things that enable experiences. Working 5 extra years for an additional $500,000 may not make up for lost experience points, especially if those are years of peak health and unique opportunities you can never get back.
So for most people, what does he suggest is the optimal net worth peak age range?
For most people, he suggests the optimal net worth peak occurs chronologically between ages 45 and 60.
45 to 60. That's much earlier than traditional retirement.
Much earlier. This is tied to your biological age and health. Someone with excellent health might push their peak slightly later, maybe early 60s. Someone with significant illness might need an earlier peak, maybe even early 40s.
So what does this mean for you, the listener?
It means, unless you're a significant exception, you ought to start spending your wealth down much earlier than what is traditionally recommended. Don't slave away at a job and never get the gold, that golden period of life experiences.
That's a powerful call to action. And it leads perfectly into the final rule, rule number 9. Take your biggest risks when you have little to lose. Perkins shares the story of Mark Cuban.
Yeah, Mark Cuban, who at tummy 3, packed his meager belongings into an old Fiat and drove to Dallas with basically nothing. He took odd jobs, got fired, slept on the floor, and eventually started his own computer consulting business.
And look where he is now.
Right. Cuban recalled that period vividly. I had nothing, so I had nothing to lose, right? It was all about going for it. Cuban was facing what Perkins calls asymmetric risk.
Asymmetric risk.
That's when the potential upside of success is much, much greater than the potential downside of failure. At the extreme, when you have almost nothing to lose, it's actually riskier not to be bold.
Why riskier not to be bold?
Because the downside of inaction is often emotional regret, the nagging what if that can haunt you for decades. That's a huge potential loss of life satisfaction. Even negative experiences or failures can yield positive memory dividends, later pride in having tried valuable lessons learned. Being bold, in this sense, is an investment in your future happiness and fulfillment.
This principle is especially true when you're young. You mentioned physical risks earlier.
Precisely. Perkins himself used to jump off his garage roof as a kid. He wouldn't dream of doing it now at 52. The downside, broken bones, long recovery, is far higher, and he has much more to lose. Responsibilities, health.
And you have more time to recover from other kinds of failure when young.
Exactly. You have plenty of time to recover financially or career-wise, like reloading in poker after a bad hand. When Perkins was fired at 23, he was scared, sure, but he knew he could correct course. He was young, had few responsibilities, and could easily find another job. Even if it hadn't worked out perfectly, he wouldn't have died or ended up on a soup line. Your reload capacity is highest when you're young.
This applies to career choices too, doesn't it? Like if you're in your early 20s and dream of being an actor.
Go for it, Perkins says. Give it your all for a few years. If it doesn't work out, you can always go back to an office job or learn a trade. The stakes are relatively low then.
But trying that at 50 is different.
Totally different. In your 50s, maybe with a mortgage, dependents, an established career, suddenly moving to Hollywood to become an actor isn't such a great plan. The stakes are much higher, and the potential rewards relative to your current life are often lower. He says the go-go years are very short. They're a finite window for certain types of risk and experience.
Why do people not take these risks when they're young, when the upside is so high and the downside seems relatively low?
Fear. They often magnify the downside in their minds, thinking of homelessness or utter ruin, even if it's completely unrealistic. Perkins told a 25-year-old named Christine, who was miserable selling plastic countertops, to just quit without another job lined up.
That takes guts. What happened?
Her fear was incredibly high, but Perkins pointed out the actual downside was incredibly low. She could always wait tables to pay rent while she figured things out. She took the risk, stumbled a bit, sure, but recovered just fine, ultimately finding a much more fulfilling path. When you're young, you can stumble and come back. The cost of failure is surprisingly low compared to the potential cost of lifelong regret.
And people also avoid bold action due to an aversion to moving, right? Fearing losing touch with friends and family.
Exactly. That's a huge one. Perkins suggests quantifying the fear. If a job pays $70,000 more across the country, calculate the actual cost of first-class plane tickets to visit loved ones multiple times a year, or the cost of flying them out to visit you.
It's probably much less than $70K.
Often, yes. Even then, people might stay put, implicitly saying they're willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars for comfort and familiarity, which is an enormous hidden the cost of inaction.
He recounts his own move to Texas for a trading job, leaving a cushy New York job. Others thought he was crazy.
They did, taking such a risky job, moving to what they perceived as a culturally alien place. He admitted having his own stereotypes about Texas, but his desire for riches and a challenging career was so great, he said he'd move to Siberia if necessary. He knew he'd hate himself if he didn't try.
High upside, low downside again.
Exactly. And even though the initial move was kind of a negative experience culture shock, adjusting to a new city, it yielded immense positive memory dividends later. He came to love Texas, built a happy life there, made great new friends. The negative initial experience eventually paid out richly in fulfillment.
And he insists the logic of my experience works at any scale, not just for millionaires.
Precisely. The Burger King worker taking night classes to get a better job, or the woman starting a food truck business in her spare time, that's being bold too, relative to their circumstances. You can choose the safer path of quiet misery, where you avoid risk but also miss opportunities for fulfillment, or the bolder, less certain, but potentially much more rewarding path.
Perkins acknowledges varying risk tolerance, though, like his mom, who always wanted him to get a safe government job.
Right, or his grandmother, who worried intensely when he made his first million. It's okay to be naturally risk-averse, but he has a clear message for them and for our listeners.
What's the message?
Two things, really. First, whatever bold moves you might contemplate for your life, you're generally better off making those moves earlier rather than later. And second, crucially, don't underestimate the risk of inaction.
The cost of playing it too safe?
Exactly. Staying safe means potentially losing experience points, irrevocably. If you consistently avoid risks, you might end up with, say, 7,000 experience points instead of the 10,000 you could have had. That's a life 30% less fulfilling, simply due to fear.
So challenge the fear.
Yeah. If you're prone to fear, really think through the absolute worst-case scenario. Often, it's not as bad as you imagine. And safety nets exist: insurance, government programs, family help. The true downside is often limited, but the upside can be infinite in terms of life fulfillment.
His final message on risk is incredibly powerful then. Your biggest fear ought to be wasting your life and time, not, am I going to have X number of dollars when I'm 80?
That really sums it up. A profound thought to conclude this dive.
So to recap this deep dive, Bill Perkins has given us what he acknowledges is an impossible task: to hit exactly zero when you die. You might not hit it perfectly, probably won't, but the power of that goal is its directional force.
Exactly. By aiming for zero, you fundamentally shift your focus. You move off that autopilot setting of simply earning and saving and endlessly maximizing wealth, and you start consciously living the best life you possibly can.
It forces you to ask that crucial question.
Why wait until your health and life energy have begun to wane? Why save the best for last when last might be compromised?
The ultimate takeaway, then, is to live your life to the fullest now. Chase memorable life experiences, give with impact whether to family or causes you care about, and make deliberate choices about how you spend your most precious resources, your time, your health, and your money.
It's about optimizing for a life well lived, not just a retirement well funded.
We all die sooner or later. Perkins would rather die when the time is right, having lived fully and without regret, than sacrifice his better years just to squeeze out a few more days at the tail end in diminished health and with dwindling capacity for enjoyment.
Or, as he likes to say, see you at the grave.
What a thought to leave us with. So what does this all mean for you, our listener? As you reflect on everything we've discussed today, what experiences are you putting off? What assumptions are you maybe making about your future health and your finite time on this planet? How will your future self look back on the choices you make today? And will they thank you for the life you truly lived? We invite you to reflect deeply on these questions because ultimately your life is the sum of your experiences, not just the final balance in your bank account.